Human Operative and alien Huntress, bitter rivals marooned together. Survival sparks the unexpected. The sharp tang of antiseptics barely covered the anxiety that lingered in the corridors of the Helios Research Complex. Sergeant Daniel Holt, Human Recon Corps, pressed himself into the shadows, matching his breaths to the rhythmic hush of filtered air. His heart ticked in time with the pattern of the patrols. 4 guards, staggered intervals, boots echoing on polished floor. Sloppy. He studied their routine, saw gaps a child could slip through. The calm piece in his ear crackled, the sound as thin and taut as the nerves running beneath his skin. Spectre to shade, came the voice. All business, no comfort. Security's on edge, something's wrong. Proceed quietly. Daniel's gloved thumb brushed the mic. Copy, Spectre. Already inside. He whispered, his breath rising in a pale cloud, instantly devoured by the sublevel's chill. His visor bathed the world in spectral blue, every surface slick with reflected light. Shadows clung to machinery, data panels pulsed in unreadable code. The intel was solid. Helios was up to something monstrous, brewing neurotoxins in direct violation of the interstellar concord. Daniel's mission was clear. Get proof, plant trackers, extract before the whole place woke up. The guard's tension told him everything he needed to know. Someone had forced them to rush. That meant mistakes. He moved with purpose, sliding into a service duct just as a pair of guards rounded the corner, their banter clipped and anxious. Spectre's voice buzzed in his ear. Shade, you have 9 minutes before their systems reboot. Understood, Daniel replied, voice flat. The duct walls squeezed him with the cold indifference of steel. He reached the main laboratory, stopping before a palm scanner slick with frost. He pressed his cloned prints to the glass, praying the intelligence was as flawless as advertised. The lock chimed, doors sliding open without protest. Inside, the lab gleamed, a white abyss broken by rows of humming equipment, the air heavy with the ozone bite of high-voltage currents. Daniel moved quickly. He located the central terminal, slid his data probe into the server port, and watched as encrypted files poured into his rig. Blue progress lines ticked upward, far too slow for comfort. He scanned the decrypted logs, eyes narrowing as the truth emerged. This isn't just a weapon, he muttered, voice low, words lost among the whir of machines. It's designed to cripple alien neural pathways. The horror settled in his gut, ethnic cleansing on a planetary scale. Helios was about to set the galaxy on fire. A flicker of motion snapped his attention to the far side of the lab. Daniel spun, pistol raised. Something sliced the air. Too fast. A blade. He ducked, the weapon missing by centimeters, embedding with a metallic thud in the wall behind him. Standing before him was an alien unlike any in his files, bronze skin glowing in the clinical light, wild red hair tumbling past enormous fox-like ears tipped with gold. Her violet eyes were huge, luminescent, narrowed in challenge. Her tail, thick, russet, alive with agitation, lashed behind her as she pulled a second dagger, tribal markings flickering across her cheeks. You humans send only one? She taunted, her accent a lilt that almost hid the danger. She circled, daggers gleaming, every muscle poised. One's all you need, Daniel replied and squeezed the trigger. She moved like a rumor, twisting aside, the bullet sparking harmlessly off the floor. She grinned, copper gold tufts of fur quivering as she darted forward, blades flashing. Their knives met with a shower of sparks, steel colliding with alien alloy. Daniel braced, boots sliding. She was smaller, but her speed turned every feint into a blur. He adjusted, blocking a downward strike, parrying a slash meant for his throat. You're meddling in my assignment, she snapped, voice tight with effort. Funny, I was about to say the same. Daniel shot back, ducking beneath her next attack. He swept his leg, aiming to knock her off balance, but she leapt, tail flicking, and landed soundlessly behind him. Her armor clung to her form, matte black etched with iridescent symbols, the material flexing with every shift. "Your scientists create monsters," she spat, eyes burning. "Weapons meant to erase my kind." Daniel sidestepped, raising his blade in warning. "And your people never tried to wipe out humans?" He feinted left, blade darting. She danced away, almost playful. "We defend. We don't annihilate." Her words were edged with sorrow. Before Daniel could answer, a deep tremor rippled through the lab. The floor quaked, glass canisters shuddering on their racks. Sirens howled, jagged, panicked. Crimson emergency lights snapped on, painting the world in pulsing scarlet. Spectre's voice cut through the noise. "Shade, self-destruct triggered. 2 minutes, get out." Daniel's heart lurched. The alien's eyes widened, her posture shifting from predator to survivor. "You did this?" she demanded, suspicion sharp in every syllable. "Not me," Daniel growled, scanning the exits. "Maybe your allies." Above them, the PA screeched. "Contamination detected. Lockdown. Evacuation initiated." They locked eyes. The truth instant and undeniable. Alone, neither would escape. Daniel weighed his options, cursed, then jerked his chin. "Truce? We can kill each other later." She hesitated, weighing the offer, then nodded once. "If we live that long?" Another blast rocked the lab, a pressure wave slamming dust from the vents. The main doors groaned, seals slamming into place. The alien sprinted to a side panel, punched in a code with trembling fingers. A hidden hatch hissed open, revealing a shaft barely wide enough for two. "After you," Daniel offered, voice dry. "So you can shoot me in the back? I'll go second." She gestured with a dagger, tail twitching. He gritted his teeth and crawled in, every muscle tensed. She followed, her scent, a heady mix of smoky spice and wildflowers, filling the narrow crawl space behind him. They emerged in the hangar, chaos blooming all around. Only one escape pod remained, its hatch half open, hull battered. The alien reached it first, her hands moving over the controls in a practiced blur. "You know how to fly?" Daniel demanded, sliding into the second seat, strapping himself in as debris rained down. "Better than you, human," she replied, never looking up. The pod's engine screamed to life. The hangar ceiling gave way, metal beams tumbling as the craft lurched out, battered by the collapsing structure. Alarms wailed, warning lights pulsing. Daniel checked the displays, every indicator in the red. "We're not making orbit," he said grimly. "There's a habitable moon. Solara. Only option." She shot him a look, equal parts defiance and resignation. Their rivalry had become survival, if only for a moment. The pod bucked, atmospheric flames licking the viewport as they plummeted toward Solara's surface. "If we survive, you'll tell me your name before I finish you," she said, voice cool, eyes fixed on the controls. Daniel barked a sharp laugh, adrenaline burning in his veins. "Daniel, Sergeant Daniel Holt." "Mila," she replied, jaw set. "Remember it. It'll be the last thing you hear." The escape pod slammed into the unknown, the world dissolving in white noise and fire. Pain lanced through Daniel as he woke, each heartbeat sending a fresh jolt through his skull. Blood trickled down his temple, warm at first, then chilling against the already cold air. The pod's emergency lights flickered in erratic pulses, painting the ruined interior in angry red and wan blue. Smoke pooled along the ceiling, thick and acrid, stinging Daniel's eyes as he blinked through the haze. He groaned, trying to orient himself. The escape pod was tilted at a sharp angle, battered hull groaning with each distant aftershock. Mila was already up, somehow free of her harness. She moved with animal grace despite the way she clutched her side, every breath shallow. Her wild red hair was matted with sweat and blood, fox-like ears flattened back as she scavenged for her weapons among the wreckage. A broken console sparked at her feet. Daniel forced himself upright, fighting the urge to black out again. He squinted at Mila through the drifting smoke. "We need to leave before the core blows," he croaked, voice raw. His tongue tasted metal and fear. Mila shot him a sidelong look, but didn't answer. Instead, she yanked a curved blade free from beneath a twisted panel. The cold gleam of the weapon was all the warning Daniel needed. Instinct screamed through his battered body, and he ducked as her knife flashed, slicing the air where his throat had been moments before. "Truce over!" he snapped, scrambling for his sidearm. His fingers closed around the grip, and he leveled the weapon, thumb flicking off the safety. Mila's lips curled in a sly, predatory smile, her tail lashing in the cramped space. "Our alliance ended with the landing, human." Her accent was even sharper now, each syllable a threat. Daniel's vision swam, but his aim was steady. He fired a warning shot, the round sparking off the hull inches from her hand. "Think again. We're stranded on a poisonous moon. No one's coming." She crouched, blade at the ready, but uncertainty flickered in her violet eyes. "My mission succeeded," she countered, chin high. "Complex destroyed, data lost." Daniel managed a grim smile, patting the breast pocket of his suit. "Except I copied it before you arrived," he said. "Kill me, and it's gone forever. You'll never get your evidence." She hesitated, blade wavering for the first time. Her gaze darted from his eyes to the pocket, calculating. "You're bluffing." He met her stare, cold and steady. "Try me." For a moment, neither moved. The only sound was the groaning hull and the distant, panicked voice of the pod's AI, rising over the static. "Warning, hull breach detected, oxygen reserves active, 60 hours remaining." Mila's frown deepened. This moon was marked as safe. Daniel shook his head, wincing at the spike of pain. "Class C, barely habitable. Gravity's fine, but the air's toxic. Sulfur, ammonia. We can't last outside, not for long." He scanned the pod's readouts, most of them flickering between errors. "If the oxygen holds, we have some time, but not much." A fragile truce formed in the tension-filled silence. Daniel holstered his sidearm, but didn't take his eyes off Mila as he took inventory of their meager supplies. Water pouches, barely enough for a few days. Ration cubes, tasteless, but they'd keep them alive. A battered medkit, half its contents scattered across the floor. 2 respirators, both dented and unreliable. "Not enough," Daniel muttered, shaking one of the respirators. The filter rattled ominously. Mila crouched over the pod's main console, nimble fingers dancing over the cracked controls. "Comms are dead," she announced. "Navigation is fried, and the beacon, barely a whisper. No one's going to hear us." Daniel's visor pinged, a faint signal flickering in the corner of his HUD. He expanded the display, squinting through the static. "I'm picking up a structure east of here. 15 clicks, maybe more. Could be an old relay station if we're lucky." Mila consulted a battered datapad, scrolling through what little she had. "Solara was abandoned decades ago. Mining poisoned the air. There shouldn't be anyone left." "Maybe someone left something useful," Daniel said, tucking away the ration cubes. "It's a better option than sitting here waiting for the oxygen to run out or the core to breach." As night crept in, the temperature dropped with merciless speed. The pod's heating struggled, the air growing thin and brittle. Outside, through the fractured viewport, Daniel watched as 3 pale moons rose over the dead landscape, their light ghostly on the ruined surface. He shivered, rubbing his arms. Mila winced, one hand pressed to her side, Her armor was torn, blood seeping through her fingers. Daniel's medic instincts overruled caution. "You're injured." She glared, bristling. "I'll manage. Let me look. If you bleed out, you're no use to me." She bared her teeth, half snarl, half grimace. "Touch me and lose a finger." Daniel held up his hands in mock surrender. "Suit yourself. Don't say I didn't offer." He turned away, but kept an eye on her, watching for any sign of collapse. Silence pressed in, broken only by the soft hum of the dwindling life support. Daniel dozed, always half alert, one hand resting on his sidearm. Whenever he cracked open an eye, he caught Mila watching him from across the cramped pod, her gaze unreadable, calculating perhaps, or merely curious. Once, as he pretended to sleep, he heard her mutter something in her own tongue, voice soft and wistful. At dawn, a sickly yellow light seeped through the viewport. Daniel woke to find Mila crouched by his bag, examining the encrypted drive he'd stolen from Helios. Her claws hovered over the data port, her expression intent. "Find what you wanted?" he asked quietly, voice low and even. Mila didn't flinch, but her ears flicked. She studied him, then the drive, then handed it back. "Your secrets are safe. For now." Her voice was cautious, yet not entirely hostile. Daniel nodded, tucking the drive away. "Mutual leverage, then." He gave her a small, lopsided smile. "Keeps things interesting." Oxygen levels had dropped again, the pod's systems flashing urgent warnings. Daniel got to work, dismantling the emergency filters and splicing them with the battered respirators. He cut strips from the medkit's bandages, fashioning makeshift seals. Mila watched, eyes narrowed, but didn't interfere. Finally, as he handed her a mask, Daniel paused. "If you despise humans so much, why bother saving me from the blast?" He adjusted his own mask, checking the seal. "Could have let me burn. No one would know." Mila hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her mask. She looked away, voice low. "Hatred is for those who haven't lost everything. I fight to survive, not for revenge." She adjusted the mask, hiding her face behind tinted glass. "Besides, you're mine to kill, not fate's." Daniel grinned behind his own mask, eyes crinkling. "Almost charming." Mila snorted. "Don't flatter yourself." They shouldered their packs and moved to the hatch. The outer seals groaned as Daniel forced the door, stale air rushing out as the first breath of Solara's atmosphere hissed in. Sulfur and ammonia burned his nose even through the filter. For a moment the two stood at the threshold, framed by the dead world. Enemies, yet partners in survival. Then, wordless, they stepped onto Solara's deadly surface. Solara sprawled before them, a wasteland of jagged stone and blood-red moss stretching to every horizon, the sky above bruised with sulfur clouds. Daniel stepped from the pod's shadow, boots crunching on brittle gravel, respirator humming with every breath. Even filtered, the air reeked, acidic, tinged with decay. The wind cut through his battered suit, carrying an alien chill that stung beneath his skin. "Relays past that ridge," he said, pointing to a jagged outcrop in the distance. The ground between was a patchwork of craters and moss, the colors so lurid they seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. Mila stalked ahead, favoring her right side, but moving with that wild, defiant grace that seemed to defy gravity. Her tail swept in careful arcs behind her, ears swiveling to every sound. She paused, glancing over her shoulder, violet eyes sharp despite the pain etched in her brow. "You're struggling," she observed, her voice muffled by her mask but heavy with amusement. Daniel gritted his teeth and kept moving, unwilling to let her see how much the cold and toxins were wearing him down. Only then did he realize she'd been watching him, cataloging every weakness. "I'll keep up," he replied, but his limbs already felt heavier, his lungs burning with every shallow breath. The trek was grueling, each step a test of endurance as the poison-laced wind bit at exposed seams. They skirted patches of crimson moss that hissed at their approach, the ground beneath damp and sticky. Mila navigated with a predator's caution, her path never straight, always zigzagging to avoid hidden dangers. They stopped beneath a leaning spire of stone, the only shelter in a sea of nothingness. Mila slumped to her haunches, her armor stained with sweat and dust, skin duller now, her bronze glow dimmed beneath the relentless toxins. Daniel knelt, hands on knees, watching her carefully. "Your body's reacting differently," he noted, pulling a strip of gauze from the medkit to dab sweat from his brow. "You're tough." She snorted, but her breath was ragged. "My people adapt," she said, but the boast sounded hollow. This world, different, unkind to outsiders. Daniel wanted to ask more, but a guttural hiss froze them both. He raised a fist, eyes darting to the brush beyond the next outcrop. Something massive moved there, the moss parting in shudders. Mila's ears went flat, tail bristling. From the crimson undergrowth, a beast lumbered into the open, 6 limbs, thick as tree trunks, dragging a sloth-bear bulk across the stone. Its hide was gray, mottled, smeared with fungus. A blunt head, ringed with unblinking eyes, swiveled toward them, nostrils flaring as it tasted the air. "Don't move," Mila whispered, barely audible through the mask. "It hunts by motion." Daniel locked his knees, heartbeat thundering in his ears. The beast paused, sniffed, then let out a low, bubbling roar. Its eyes, dozens of them, fixed on Mila. In a blink, it surged forward, each step shaking the ground. Mila tried to sidestep, but her wound slowed her. The creature lunged, straight for her. Instinct overrode caution. Daniel hurled himself into its path, arm raised in defense. Claws raked down his sleeve, tearing fabric and flesh, acid spattered, burning deep. He gritted his teeth against the pain and rammed his combat knife upward into the beast's throat, where softer flesh pulsed beneath the armor-like hide. The creature convulsed, an ear-splitting shriek echoing across the rocks. It toppled, crushing Daniel beneath its bulk for a split second before shuddering and going still. He rolled clear, gasping, arms searing with pain. Mila was beside him instantly, hands moving fast. She tore strips from her own suit, patching the gash in his sleeve, then sealing the breach with adhesive from the medkit. Her fingers were deft, efficient, betraying only the slightest tremor. "Now you're exposed," Daniel rasped, watching her work. "Calculated risk," she replied, voice flat but gaze steady. "You're less useful dead." She finished tying off the patch, then looked at him with something new in her eyes, respect, sharp as a blade. Night closed in before they reached the ridge, forcing them to take shelter in a shallow den carved into the hillside. Moss carpeted the walls, glowing faintly in the dark, bathing them in red and purple shadows. Daniel checked the seals on their respirators, then set a perimeter alarm just in case. As they settled, Daniel found himself watching Mila. The glow from the moss played over her skin, illuminating intricate patterns, tribal markings swirling down her arms, fading where her armor had been torn away. Her tail curled protectively around her legs, ears drooping with fatigue. She caught him looking, her eyes softer in the dimness. "Why save me?" she asked suddenly. "Back there, with the beast. You could have let it take me." Daniel shrugged, stretching his sore arm. "You weren't an enemy just then. Just someone in danger." She snorted, but her voice lost its edge. "Compassion is a weakness," she said, as if repeating something drilled into her since childhood. "Is that what they teach your kind?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. She hesitated, tail curling tighter. "It's what I learned." She stared at the wall, voice growing distant. Humans destroyed my village. I was a child. The air burned, the ground cracked, and everything was gone. After that, I learned compassion is dangerous. Daniel didn't offer platitudes. He simply nodded, understanding etched in the lines of his face. War makes victims of us all, he said quietly. They fell silent, the unspoken truce between them settling into something warmer, less brittle. Mila drifted closer in the cold, sharing body heat beneath the thin blanket Daniel had salvaged. By morning, they lay back to back, breaths synchronized, no longer just enemies by necessity. They broke camp at first light, neither speaking of the night. The world was no less deadly in the sun, but the relay station finally came into view. A squat, battered structure half buried in stone, its walls scored by wind and time. Daniel scanned for threats, then keyed the entry panel. The airlock groaned open, seals hissing. Once inside, he closed the lock behind them and checked his visor. Stale, but safe, he pronounced. The interior was chaos. Cables ripped from the walls, overturned crates, a trail of muddy footprints. Every console flashed red with system errors, the scent of ozone and old blood heavy in the air. Mila moved fast, searching for an air processor, her movements tense and purposeful. She rummaged through drawers and lockers, tail flicking in agitation. Daniel found a battered terminal and jacked in his data probe, scanning files while keeping one eye on the door. This wasn't just mining, he muttered, reading the log entries. They were experimenting on the local wildlife, trying to adapt species to the toxins. Most of the subjects didn't survive. Mila grimaced, ears laid back. Typical, she spat. Conquered law means nothing here. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over Daniel. His vision tunneled, lungs burning as if he'd sucked pure ammonia. He tried to stand, but the world spun out from under him. Mila's voice called his name, sharp with alarm, but it faded into static as he collapsed, the relay's gray ceiling blurring above him. Darkness swallowed the chaos, and Daniel knew nothing more. Daniel woke to the metallic tang of disinfectant and the faint whir of medical equipment. Harsh light cut through his eyelids. He groaned, the ache in his chest sharp but distant, as if filtered through cotton. Blinking, he found himself on a narrow cot in the relay station's makeshift medical bay. Mila hovered nearby, her wild hair pulled back, violet eyes focused on a battered scanner clutched in her trembling hands. "How long?" he rasped, his throat raw. 5 hours, she replied, voice tight with exhaustion. "You should be dead." Daniel blinked, propping himself up on one elbow. His head spun, but the fog was receding. "Glad to disappoint." Mila's gaze lingered on the scanner, worry etched in the lines of her brow. "The toxin should have killed you," she said, troubled. "But your cells are changing, healing." She turned the device toward him. Grainy scans appeared on the cracked display, a tangle of DNA, some strands highlighted in green. "Your genetic structure," she explained. "I engineered sequences. They match the files I copied from Helios." Daniel squinted at the screen, the words blurring before snapping into focus. Project Helix. His memories stirred. Cold clinics, white lights, the ache of endless injections, the distant voices of scientists debating his future. Project Helix, he muttered aloud. Human program. Biological resistance. His chest tightened. "I was one of their test subjects. They started the injections when I was a child." Mila slumped onto a bench, pale and shaking, her own mask slipping askew. Sweat matted the fur at her temples, her bronze skin dulled to an ashen hue. Daniel struggled upright, swinging his legs off the cot. "You're getting worse," he said quietly, watching her fight to steady her breath. She flashed a brittle smile, coughing into her fist. Sharp, aren't you? He crossed the cramped bay in 2 steps, steadying her as she sagged. Maybe the medbay has something. Nothing can cure this, she spat, pushing his hand away. Not for my kind. Not for this poison. Daniel hesitated, thinking of the Helix Project, the way his blood had rejected every toxin, every pathogen. Except maybe me, he said, the idea landing heavy between them. My blood might help. Mila's gaze locked onto his, suspicion and hope warring in her eyes. Why? She demanded, voice a hoarse whisper. Daniel shrugged, searching for words. Maybe I'm tired of being a pawn. Maybe I don't want to watch another innocent die for someone else's experiment. She stared at him a long moment, then nodded, sharp and decisive. Let's try it. Together, they scrounged the bay for supplies. Daniel sterilized a transfusion kit while Mila prepared her arm, eyes never leaving his face. He slid the needle into his vein, watching his own blood snake through clear tubing and into hers. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the soft, rhythmic beeping of the medbay's monitors, 2 enemies sharing lifeblood. If this kills me, Mila said, voice dry as desert wind, at least it's poetic. Daniel offered a crooked smile. You're a strange one, you know that. Her lips twitched, a faint smile flickering across her face. Takes one to know one. They watched the crimson flow, silent. Slowly, color crept back into Mila's cheeks. Her breathing eased, the dullness in her eyes lifting. Daniel felt a strange kinship blooming, a trust as fragile as glass, but they're all the same. My blood buys me time, she said at last, flexing her fingers. But it's not a cure, just a reprieve. Daniel nodded. Enough to get answers. Now let's find out who set us up. Days blurred into one another. Every 2 days, Daniel gave another transfusion, the ritual growing familiar. Mila's strength returned in fits and starts. Between treatments, they sparred in the relay's cramped corridors, honing muscle and instinct. Mila's movements were a blur, fluid, unpredictable, her daggers flashing. Daniel's counterattacks were precise, honed by years of military training. Each match ended in breathless laughter or bruised pride. One evening, Mila fainted left and swept Daniel's legs from under him. He landed hard, breath knocked from his chest. She straddled him, pinning his wrists, their faces inches apart. For a moment the air thickened, her wild scent, the heat of her body pressed against his, the brush of her hair across his cheek. Neither moved. Mila's eyes searched his, uncertain and fierce. Daniel could feel the rapid beat of her heart, the tremor in her fingers as she released him and stood, turning away. He lay there, catching his breath, wondering when survival had started to feel like something else. They worked together to salvage the relay's shattered comm unit. Hours of frustration finally paid off. Mila coaxed a faint signal from the battered hardware while Daniel pieced together corrupted logs. The relay, it turned out, had been in secret contact with a hidden outpost, Astra's Edge. The last recorded message was a warning. Biohazard breach. Abandoned station. A storm broke over Solara that night. Violet lightning forked across the sky, shrieking winds battering the relay's walls. The world outside vanished in swirling haze. Forced into the command center, Daniel and Mila waited out the tempest, sharing warmth beneath a threadbare blanket. Tell me about your home, Mila asked softly, her head resting against the bulkhead, voice muffled by the wind outside. Daniel closed his eyes, summoning memories of a life that felt impossibly distant. Blue oceans, crowded cities, sunsets so bright they hurt your eyes, the smell of rain on old concrete. He smiled faintly. And you? Mila's voice softened. Villages built in the treetops. We sang to the stars every night. My mother said they listened. She paused, eyes shining. Sometimes I still sing, when I'm alone. The days of storm wore down their walls. On the third night, the wind howled like a wounded beast, rattling every vent and panel. Mila sat beside Daniel on the floor, knees drawn to her chest. "Did you ever believe in your orders?" she asked, voice fragile. Daniel hesitated, staring at his hands. "I believed in protecting my own. I thought that was enough, until I saw what it cost." "If we prove we were used," Mila pressed, "what then? What do we do with the truth?" He started to answer, but Mila didn't wait. She leaned in, her breath warm against his skin, her eyes burning with defiance and longing. She brushed his cheek, then kissed him, gentle and fierce, a promise and a question all at once. Daniel melted into the touch, hands tangling in her hair, the world shrinking to the space between them. Morning found them curled together on the cot, bronze skin against human. The storm had passed, leaving only silence and the fragile peace of dawn. Mila lay awake, her gaze steady, head propped on one hand. Daniel blinked, startled by the intensity of her stare. "You're staring," she teased. He grinned, tracing the tribal marking on her shoulder, the whorls and lines soft beneath his fingers. "Can you blame me?" She caught his hand, holding it between them. "This changes nothing." Daniel shook his head, smiling. "It changes everything." She didn't argue. Instead, she slipped from the cot, dressing quickly, her movements brisk and efficient once more. "Storm's over. Let's finish this." With new resolve, they worked as a team, moving through the relay station's shadowed corridors with the grace of old partners. Mila adjusted the comm array while Daniel triple-checked the security on their files. Tension lingered beneath the surface, but it was no longer mistrust. It was the anticipation of choices that would matter far beyond them. As they soldered the last comm relay, Mila broke the silence. "There's something I didn't tell you," she said, her tail flicking with unease. "My orders weren't just sabotage and extraction. I was supposed to retrieve samples. Genetic, environmental for my people's military. They want to engineer immunity. Weapons, if they must." Daniel met her gaze, a rueful smile ghosting his lips. "You're not the only one with ugly orders." He leaned back, scrubbing a hand over his jaw. "My side wanted the Helios data to create targeted bioagents. All that talk of peace, just a cover for new weapons. I was supposed to bring back the proof and the means to deploy it." Mila gave a bitter laugh, the sound hollow in the empty station. "We're both expendable, just pawns on someone else's board." Daniel looked at her, something fierce in his eyes. "Then let's stop being pawns." Before she could answer, an alarm blared, a crimson warning on the console. "Motion sensors, predators closing in." Daniel's voice was taut, professional. At dusk, the station's outer sensors picked up the first lumbering shapes. 6-limbed beasts, their massive bodies moving with hungry intent through the blood-red moss. The pair moved fast, securing the doors, prepping weapons. The wind outside moaned as the first creature slammed against the hull, rattling the thin walls. Daniel and Mila fought back to back, moving in perfect synchrony, blades and gunfire dancing through the gloom. Mila leapt, daggers flashing, tail lashing for balance as she sliced a beast's throat. Daniel fired precise shots, covering her flank as another creature lunged from the darkness. Acid hissed against metal, claws screeched, but together they moved as one, parrying, striking, never hesitating. The final beast fell in a heap of limbs and blood, the air thick with the tang of ozone and scorched fur. Breathless, they turned to each other, blood spattered and shaking with adrenaline. Daniel grinned. "We make a good team." "For now," Mila agreed, but her eyes were warm with something that went deeper than rivalry. Later, as they huddled in the quiet aftermath, Daniel finally spoke of the ache that had haunted him since childhood. "I've always felt out of place," he admitted, voice low. Even before the Helix project, I was the orphan soldier, the experiment that didn't fit anywhere. Not with humans, not with the cause. Mila looked away, tracing a crack in the wall. You're not alone in that. I followed orders because I wanted to believe in my leaders, my people. But the closer I got to their secrets, the less sure I became. I saw what power did, how it twisted purpose. Daniel reached for her hand, fingers brushing fur and skin. If we call for rescue, he whispered, we go back to being enemies. Mila held his gaze, her breath shuddering. Maybe we don't call. But they both knew it was a lie, a moment's comfort. Duty would win. It always did. The comm was ready at last. They stood before the flickering screen, hands entwined. We could stay, Mila suggested, her voice barely audible. Just us. Solara is hell, but for a little while, it's ours. Daniel wanted to say yes, but the latest scans told a cruel truth. Mila's body was resisting his transfusions. The reprieve was fading. It won't last, he said quietly, thumb tracing a circle on her hand. She nodded, pain flickering in her eyes. Then let's do what's right. Daniel finished the analysis. His blood was the template for a universal antidote, the key to undoing Helios's horrors. He stared at the data, the enormity of it pressing down. If we keep this secret, we can't. Mila cut in, firm and clear. We have to do the right thing, even if it costs us. Together, they sent the evidence, encrypted project files, and the formula for the cure to trusted contacts on both sides. Mila's fingers hesitated over the transmit button, her lips trembling. She caught Daniel's wrist before he could send the final message. You know what happens next. They'll separate us. Daniel cupped her face, determination in every line. Let them try. We survive this moon. He kissed her. A promise, a rebellion, a goodbye and a beginning. They sealed the promise with a final lingering kiss, then activated the beacon. It wasn't long before the sky above Solara filled with ships. First the cold, angular silhouette of a human frigate, then the sleek, iridescent hull of an alien cruiser. Daniel and Mila stood side by side on the relay platform as landing craft descended, soldiers pouring out, armor gleaming, weapons ready. Stay alive, Daniel mouthed as they were surrounded. You too, Mila whispered, squeezing his hand one last time before they were torn apart by their respective teams. On board the frigate, Daniel faced Commander Voss, a man with granite eyes and a mouth set in perpetual disapproval. The debrief was an interrogation. Cold, relentless. You did your duty, Voss said, voice flat. Daniel met his gaze, anger simmering. You were ready to commit genocide. Necessary losses, Voss replied, as if it were a line from a manual. Meanwhile, Mila was marched before High Matron Sira, the elder's gaze sharp as obsidian. You endangered our cause, Sira accused, voice cold. Mila stood tall, chin high. He's the cure, not the enemy. You betrayed us. You betrayed us first, Mila shot back, voice trembling with fury. They were separated, imprisoned, cells cold, lightless, the silence broken only by their own memories. Each night, Daniel replayed their final moments together, the vows whispered between gunmetal walls. Each night, Mila clung to the memory of his touch, the promise of more. One night, footsteps echoed outside Daniel's cell. The door slid open. A woman in a lab coat, Dr. Kessler, one of the Helios architects, stood in the corridor. Time to go, she whispered. Daniel slipped into the shadows, following her through the maze of service corridors, adrenaline sparking with every step. Across the void, Mila watched for her chance. When her guard faltered, she moved, swift and silent, a predator. She disabled her captor, stole a shuttle and piloted it through the chaos above Solara. The comm crackled. Daniel's stolen shuttle broke orbit, and for a moment, two ships danced alone in the starlit dark. Their vessels met in orbit, docking with a hiss of equalized pressure. Mila appeared in the hatch, breathless and wild-eyed. "Need a co-pilot?" Daniel grinned, heart pounding. "Always." Together, they jammed the frigate's command codes, sabotaged the engines, then sent the cure and files to every fleet, every news channel, every outpost across the system. Mila's voice echoed over the comm, defiant, proud, unafraid. Their pod drifted between the warships, powerless but alive. Human and alien forces, stunned by the flood of truth, hesitated. Guns lowered, orders suspended. Daniel and Mila, hand in hand, waited in the silence for what came next. A future unwritten, but theirs to shape. Rescued by a neutral station at Astra's edge, Daniel and Mila found themselves standing side by side in a vaulted chamber of glass and steel. The windows looked out onto the swirling nebula, the colors shifting with each passing minute. Violet, blue, and gold dancing across the hull. The room was lined with banners from both worlds, the Earth flag and the iridescent sigil of Mila's people. Officers and envoys crowded the chamber, faces drawn and wary, old enemies united by a single desperate hope. At the far end of the council table, Matron Sira sat cloaked in blue, her gaze as cold as deep space. Beside her, Commander Voss stood, hands folded behind his back, jaw clenched. Their retinues filled either side, eyes flicking from Daniel to Mila and back again. A security officer called the assembly to order. The chamber fell silent, save for the quiet hiss of circulating air and the distant hum of engines. Sira's voice sliced through the quiet. "Proof?" she demanded, her accent sharp and precise. Mila stepped forward. The weight of 1,000 decisions rode on her shoulders, but her hands were steady as she set the data drive on the polished table. The device gleamed under the council lights, a tiny thing holding the fate of worlds. "All the files," Mila said, voice unwavering. "All the orders, from both sides. Experiment logs, tactical directives, evidence of the weapons programs. Everything you need to see the truth." Voss eyed the drive, then gestured to a technician. A moment later, the files appeared in holographic clarity. Images of mutated beasts, gene sequences, intercepted orders, lists of targeted settlements. Every secret laid bare, every motive exposed. Daniel watched the faces around the table, some pale with shock, others burning with anger, a few blinking away tears. Silence stretched, heavy and absolute. No one moved. The weight of every life lost and every betrayal hovered in the air. Finally, Voss spoke, his voice gravelly. "If this is true, we must choose, war or peace. There is no middle path." His words echoed in the chamber, drawing the eyes of every delegate. Sira nodded, her posture regal but weary. "We must answer for our crimes, for the sake of the dying and the dead." She inclined her head, and one of her aides activated a secure comm line. "Send word. Hospital ships to every contaminated world. Begin peace talks at once." The room erupted in murmured relief. Doctors and aides hurried from the chamber, already relaying orders. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. Hope, tentative and fragile. Commander Voss turned to Daniel, his expression unreadable. "You changed everything, Sergeant Holt. You uncovered the truth and forced our hands. You will represent both sides at the negotiations." A beat of stunned silence. Daniel's mind reeled. "Me?" he said, struggling to believe it. Mila squeezed his hand, her warmth grounding him. "We accept," she said, gaze fierce. "On one condition, we stay together. As partners, as equals." A ripple of surprise ran around the table. Syrah and Voss exchanged glances, one long, measuring, then another, less guarded. Agreed, Syrah said softly. Voss nodded, the faintest hint of respect in his eyes. Agreed. Applause broke out, first a few, then the entire chamber, rising like thunder. For the first time, Daniel and Mila stood not as fugitives or soldiers, but as symbols of a future no one had dared imagine. In that moment, they were not human and alien, not enemy and enemy, but two souls who had risked everything to offer their worlds a chance at healing. The formalities melted away. Delegates pressed in with questions, gratitude, cautious promises. Daniel shook hands with officers who had once hunted him. Mila spoke in her lilting tongue to elders who regarded her with awe and suspicion in equal measure. Across the hall, a pair of human doctors embraced a group of Mila's kin, the first threads of trust weaving themselves into something real. Later, as the crowds faded and the station settled into a rare hush, Daniel and Mila found a quiet alcove overlooking the nebula. The stars blazed beyond the glass, uncaring and eternal. Mila leaned on the railing, her silhouette outlined in gold. She looked at Daniel, her eyes soft, searching. "What now?" she asked, her voice hushed but strong. "We've given them the truth, given them hope. What do we do with the future?" Daniel stepped close, reaching up to brush a fiery strand behind her ear. He marveled at the tenderness in the gesture, at how natural it felt after so many days of fighting for every moment. "Now we build something new," he said, his voice steady with conviction. "Something neither of our peoples has seen before. Something worth all this risk." Mila's lips curled into a radiant smile, brighter than any nebula. "Together?" she asked, hope and promise in the single word. He laced his fingers with hers, feeling the warmth and strength there. "Always," Daniel promised. Hand in hand, they stepped away from the window and into the corridor, leaving behind the scars of war and the shadows of old hatred. They moved toward the unknown, two worlds watching, history waiting to be rewritten. Bound by love, forged by adversity, Daniel and Mila walked forward, determined to shape a better world for both their peoples. That's the end of the story. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.